Good afternoon, and you're very welcome to another episode of the Women's National League podcast here on finewhistle.ie. That's no longer called the Women's National League podcast. It's the League of Ireland Women's podcast. I'm Breifne Earley, and of course joined as always by Aaron Clarke. Aaron, it's been a busy week. How was your week?
Yeah, it's been not too bad. It was interesting to watch Shamrock Rovers get their first win last weekend. Dominating win is probably the best way to put it. And yeah, it's been interesting. Football of a different sort of going to take over a lot of people's televisions over the next month. But listen, the women's game continues to roll on. Big games this weekend. Lots happening over the next 4 to 6 weeks, and just excited. Looking forward to what's to come.
No guest this week. We're going to take a look back at the season so far. We're going to be looking at how each of the 11 sides in the League of Ireland Women's Premier Division have fared this year. We'll also take a look at some of the international news. Páirc Uí Chaoimh, of course, announced for that international Nations League qualifier, Nations League or / European Championship qualifier, whatever way you want to look at it. That's in Páirc Uí Chaoimh in next month against France. €25 ticket. Aaron, you reckon ticket sales going okay at the moment?
Yeah, it looks to be going okay. I'd expect to see a big push in them. I'd be interested to see how much of the Cork Brigade will really come out in force.
Yeah,
I've seen a few things on social media I don't like over this in the last week or so.
We'll get into the details later on in the show. Waterford, of course, announced this week that they're in a position to apply for a League of Ireland license to join the Women's Premier Division, making it a 12-team league. We also saw some disappointment in Carlow Kilkenny. They weren't allowed into the league. They weren't successful. We'll talk about that later in the show as well. And of course, as always, we'll be taking a look at all the results from last weekend. Some great games, particularly maybe that finish in Galway where Wexford snatched what seemed to be a late winner for Galway away from them and took all 3 points back to the southeast after two late great goals from Wexford, a penalty and an opportunistic Ceola Bergen just capitalising on a bit of a mistake in the Galway defence. Some other big results as well. We'll talk about all of that later. Aaron, were you at games over the weekend? What did you see? What did you think?
I seen bits of most of them. I was at Bows and Rovers to witness Rovers' first league win of the season, and it was like what Collie O'Neill had said to me after they drew with Shelbourne and Talca Park. He said, "One of these days we're going to click and we're going to batter somebody." That's what it was. It was literally boom, boom, boom. First half was probably a little bit of a scrappy affair. Both we had better up to possession, but didn't really create any chances. And once that first Rovers goal went in, you sort of thought, okay, they're going to score a couple, and they just did quick succession goals. And it was interesting to see, just because the camaraderie within some of the players, because you could see they needed that result. You could see how much that result sort of that result meant to them, especially when Jess Hennessy with the first goal, then when they get the second and the third and then the fourth, and it was a big relief, I think, from the Rovers side. But speaking to Collie after the game, he sort of said a lot of teams were away on holiday last week. They were in doing training, they were in doing like physical runs and stuff like that, where players were tested, mentally and physically, to the stage that there was some sick buckets nearly being needed, and maybe that's what Rovers needed to sort of turn that sort of flow around. But because they're now in the position that if they get a win this weekend, they could go on a run of getting with the fixtures they have and getting a couple of wins in a row.
Yeah, of course, they travel to Sligo this weekend. Sligo bottom of the table after their defeat to, I suppose, the basement sides, DLR Waves 2-0 at the weekend. We'll talk about that game specifically. Let's stay on Rovers for a moment, because we've given them a bit of a hard time on the show because of the nature of the results so far. That one win, is it a panacea? Does it clear all the issues, or do they need to start putting a couple of results back to back?
No, one win's not enough. Absolutely not. And that's the message that I got from them, from the camp after the game, is it's all well and good winning one game. If you don't go and win 3-4 games in a row, it's not really a case of you're making a sort of a push. They need to go and win multiple games and put a string of results together, and they were emphasizing that as much. And I think that's the biggest thing that sort of tells me, is that they know it's all well and good beating Bows, but if you don't go and beat Sligo, and then you don't go and put in a performance against in the All-Island Cup, and then against Athlone in the league, what's the point in winning one game?
Yeah, of course. So over the next couple of league games, they've got Sligo away this week. They host Athlone in 2 weeks' time, and then in early June they make the trip to Treaty before they get their break off, and then Cork City at home. So by the end of July, they could realistically add maybe 7, 9, 10, even 12 points if they get a result in Athlone, based on form or based on, I suppose, not necessarily form, but pedigree or expectations. They could be in a very different position in 6 weeks' time.
Realistically, they'll tell you nothing short of at least 9.9, 10 points out of 12 is good enough from them 4 games. They will say that, and they'll be open and honest about that. And I think that's the thing about it, is that they realise the situation they're in. They realise a lot of what's gone on. And like the one thing I got from the camp, and I spoke to Anya, I spoke to Jess, is that, like, there's still a togetherness between a lot of them players, that they believe that the results are going to start coming on a regular basis. And as much as they do know how important that game was against Bohs was for the magnitude of the result, I think you can see there, like, some of them top players are still very positive, are still sort of, they know what they need to do, they know where they need to go. Interesting on this game as well, 1,011 fans at this game. I think it was the highest attended game at the weekend as well, which is a big number on a Saturday, on a lovely Saturday afternoon. Bohs giving out free ice cream to, I think it was the first 400 fans through the gate. No doubt that had a little few extra in the door, but like, it's good to see them sort of initiatives. It's good to see over 1,000 people, and from a Bohs viewpoint, they'll be extremely disappointed with that performance. It was not where it needed to be. They had some very, very good passages in the first half when they got Sarah McKevitt on the ball, when they switched it, and she was up against Scarlett Heron, who isn't a natural left back, and sort of Scarlett done okay against her, but Sarah definitely had the better of that duel. But Bohs just couldn't do anything in terms of actual troubling Summer Lawless in goal, who had started ahead of Amanda Budden.
Let's talk about some of the changes Shamrock Rovers made for the game last week, because as well as Summer Lawless making, I think, her first start of the league season this year, I could be wrong on that. But
second. She started against Treaty when I think she started. She either played one or two starts in the season, because Amanda had a knee injury at the start of the season.
Of course, yeah. But another inclusion in the team that haven't seen much starting time in recent weeks is Stephanie Zambra back in the fold. Mm-hmm. She was involved directly, I think, in maybe the third goal. I can't remember who scored it now. But
only got the third.
Yeah, but it was a nice through ball from Steph. It got cut out, but that we haven't seen a lot of that kind of playmaking from that Rover side to actually deliver it on a plate for a forward before. What difference do you think she made you at the game?
She definitely had a difficult game. It wasn't easy for her. There was times where you could see she was running on nearly having to chase onto lost causes or chase onto things. The problem with someone like her is when you're not scoring regularly, someone who's been used to scoring regularly, it's definitely a hit. You could even see with the likes of Joy Ralph, probably they lacking that little bit of confidence at the minute. And like, I think that was evident even when you look at Joy from the game against Galway, when she had the 2 chances where, if she's on form, she rounds the keeper or she buries it before the keeper gets to her. And you could definitely see it from the 2 Rovers up top that they were maybe lacking that little bit of confidence, lacking that little. I think, if I'm not mistaken, Steph hasn't started many games since the 0-0 draw, which Shalborn. She's been coming off the bench quite a lot. For her, there's no doubt she's probably frustrated. It's probably a little bit disappointed that she's not getting more opportunities. Like, it was a difficult first half to sort of get into, and as you say, like, she did have some involvement in that third goal, but it's a difficult one for her. It's a case of she's going to have to stick with her processes, and then when she gets a chance, she's going to have to take it to stay in that Rovers team.
It's going to be very hard for Collie to change the team now after a 4-0 victory at your arch rivals. In terms of the season ahead for Shamrock Rovers, of course, they travel to Sligo this weekend, but in the overall picture, 12 games left, almost the halfway point. They're 14 points behind the league. That's probably beyond them. Is a 4th place finish, currently 7 points of a gap to Peamount? Is that a realistic target for Shamrock Rovers at this point, or is that even too ambitious given the poor start they've had?
See, the problem is we don't. Not that the problem is. The thing is, we don't know what way the second half of the season is going to go. We've seen Galway suffer their first defeat. Chelsea, the only team who were unbeaten. Like, even you look at Wexford in 5th place, they've lost 4 games. It's a league table that's probably not reflected. It's not reflected in terms of the overall, because some of the teams have been able to string a set of results where others haven't. I definitely do see a lot of teams dropping points in the second half of the season. I see quite a few draws coming in the second half of the season. For Rovers, if they can get on a run, there's no reason why they can't get up in and around that 4th, 5th position, and they'll sort of be targeting the All-Island Cup, and they'll be targeting the FAI Cup as well, to see if they can get a good run in that. But I think the top 3 is probably that little bit too far ahead. But then again, the only thing is if Rovers going to run and win 7-8 games in a row, what's going to happen around them? That's the other question, with all these other sides having to play each other. When we've seen the likes of Sligo getting results against Shelbourne that many people didn't expect. We see DLR drawing with both Peamount and Shamrock Rovers this season. So there is still them couple of anomaly or surprise results that do tend to pop up. So like, it's all about ifs and buts, if they can get on that run of results. But in order for them to move up that table, they're going to need to go on a run of results where them next 4 games that we talked about, they have to win at least 3 of them and potentially get a draw of that loan. If they could win all 4 of them, there's no doubt they'll definitely push up and try to close that gap to the top 3. But if they don't, that's where it becomes really, really difficult.
Of course, they drew Wexford at home in the FAI Cup as well. We might chat about that cup draw later on in the programme too. Let's move on. Before we move on from Shamrock Rovers, should I say, Katie O'Reilly got the last goal. Great header from an Anya O'Gorman cross. One for the future?
Yeah, looks like a really good promising youngster from the Shamrock Rovers. That's actually her first league. It's her first Premier Division goal. So for her, it's a good one. Then you've got young Ella Kelly, who obviously scored in the All-Ireland Cup for them. I think there is some good youngsters in Shamrock Rovers, and I think Collie is sort of using that process to sort of blood some of these and give some of these that opportunity. And I think Katie O'Reilly's definitely taken it. She's been in and around that team all season, and she definitely had a good game for them on Saturday for sure.
Yeah. Moving over west, one of the top games of the weekend, I think, in terms of how it turned out, at least, Galway United and Wexford. A bit of cagey affair, very little in it for the first 75 minutes or so. Up stepped Jenna Slattery with the most unusual free kick I've ever seen. Everyone expecting a cross, probably even our own teammates expecting a cross. The goalkeeper definitely expecting a cross. But Jane Marin just left stranded as she hit the top corner from about 35 yards out near the sideline. On the near post, just caught the goalkeeper out completely, caught the entire defence, probably most people in the stadium out completely. But Wexford hadn't read the script. 2 late goals, kind of a bit of a mistake in the Galway defence, as I mentioned at the top of the show, and just Ceola Bergen snatched on it, 3 minutes to go, and then a penalty after a foul by Eve Dawson, and Aoibhinn Clancy stepped up to bury the win, and a great result for Wexford. Worrying for Galway?
I wouldn't say necessarily worrying just yet, because like Wexford have pushed they pushed Shells close. The couple of the 3 times they played them this year, they've twice they played them this year. They pushed them close. They pushed other teams close. Like we said about Wexford, that they'd need to go on that bit of a run. That's 2 league wins on the bounce for Wexford. Like for them, they're maybe starting to find that little bit of a groove. Rihanna Jarrett back in the squad for the first time this season. When you look at the first goal, for me, like, what Jen had done with her right foot as well. That's what probably makes it even more innocuous, is the fact that if it's a left footer, you can always say it's one of them that it was a missed time. It was definitely a cross, but that was something she looked at and she sort of aimed for. The 2 goals that Galway conceded, I think Galway would be very disappointed with. The first one, they're under no real pressure. Ball's in midfield, then it's played back, and the goalkeeper gives it to Wexford forward, and Bergen finishes quite well. I wouldn't necessarily blame that as much on the goalkeeper. I think going back the way they went back was probably a bit needless. You could see even Rihanna Jarrett's press on it. She didn't even put a full press on it. She sort of just jogged across just to try and cut off one option, and I thought it was a poor passage of play, not necessarily just the fact of giving the ball away, but the whole passage was poor from Galway. And then the penalty for me, Eriksson, she lets the player Bergen go down that left flank and sort of makes Dawson have to come across her, but then she comes back across towards the penalty spot. I think Eriksson has to be talking to Dawson there to say, hey, listen, there's no one in the box, there's no one here. She's going away from goal, just stand. It's quite a clumsy lunge in, and it's a penalty all day. And from a Galway viewpoint, they'd be extremely disappointed with that, the fact that they were 1-0 up and to lose that game. we did say last week on the show it's going to be interesting when Galway have that moment that they do lose that game and how they bounce back and how they go about it. That's probably for me what's going to be the key characteristics of this Galway side. Can they bounce back after a defeat against Wexford when they look to be, heading for the 3 points?
Yeah, Shelby's top of the league, of course. Big win for them down in Treaty. They made hard work of it, and they really only scrambled home the one goal from Hannah Healy. I think it was Hannah Healy. Not quite sure who got it, but it was just a bit of a pinball effort in the box. I haven't seen a goal quite like that in this season, at least.
Yeah, it was a mental goal, and it was one that, well, I feel like after giving it to Ava O'Mahony. So it was one of them for me that was like, from a Treaty viewpoint, you're extremely frustrated that you can see that goal, the way the scramble happened, and you look at that stage, and it's something that I've said to you quite often, is when you get with Shells, if you hang in a game with Shells for 60, 70 minutes, they can get frustrated, they can get, come under a little bit of pressure, and they got away with one there. Like, that's their I think it's their 5th win on the spin, and starting to put a nice run together, especially considering in the early games that they 3 draws out of 4, and for them it's hitting form at the right time. It's not always going to be pretty. It's sometimes you are going to have to scrap against a team like Treaty, but we've seen what Treaty are capable of, especially at home. They put it, they got the draw against Rovers. They put it up to other teams. They put it up to other teams. Even go back as far as bringing Peamount to extra time last year in the FAI Cup at home. They're very good, and they'll be disappointed for them having lost that, having come off the defeat to Wexford the week previous. But for Shells, the train of momentum just keeps going, and into that massive game this weekend, Owen Wirren will be extremely happy with where his squad are going into that.
Let's talk about their scoring prowess, though, at the moment, because they seem to lack goals, even though they're top of the league. 14 goals in 9 games. That's not like the Shells of old.
No, they're having to win games differently. They're having to win games by dogged and determined in some games, to where previously we used to see Shells that when against some of the sort of lesser, weaker sides, they put 5-6 past them. Like, if you look, I think the score was a 5 against Cork when they played Cork. I think that's the biggest result. Otherwise, they're putting in 1-0 or 2-1 win. They're sort of close-knit games. Yes, they're not scoring a lot of goals, but I think that's probably it's a reflection of the other team defenses, but also B, I think it's a reflection of Shells not necessarily having that out-and-out striker who's going to get them 20 goals. Young Rebecca Devereux has the potential to do it. She's probably a little bit away, and to put that sort of pressure on someone like Devereux to say she has to score them goals, it'd be a bit unfair. I don't think Noelle Murray really has that sort of numbers in our bank anymore, but Noelle can still score you a sublime or a piece of magic when needed, and she can still dictate certain things in games, but she's not going to go and score you 15, 20 goals a season anymore. And their goals seem to be an awful lot more spread out. Like, you've seen Ava O'Mahony scored a couple. We're seeing other players who are scoring them, Hannah Healy. We're seeing, the goals are more spread out at Shells than they've probably ever been.
Yeah, Cork, of course, they hosted Athlone Town, and another sign maybe of how close the league is becoming in terms of the perceived weaker sides against the stronger sides. You look at last year's league table: Cork in the bottom 2, Athlone winning the cup in the shake-up for the league, 1-0, and probably not even. The goal was a decent strike from the edge of the box. Goalkeeper maybe could have done a bit better with it in terms of the position and that sort of stuff. It just seemed like it was avoidable, but only 1-0 for Athlone down in Cork. Last year or the year before, we might have seen that as 3 or 4-0 automatically. It really is compressing the teams in the division.
Yeah, like we've seen what Cork have been capable at home. They were beaten by Peamount in the opening day of the season. They've beaten Shamrock Rovers at home. They've pushed a lot of teams at home. They're sort of making use of Turner's Cross to sort of have it as one of them places that it's hard to go. It's hard to get a result. I think from them, yes, as you say, previous years they probably would have been happy with a 1-0 loss against the likes of Athlone in that situation. But I think the mentality under Danny Murphy has changed massively this year, and they'll be extremely frustrated. In terms of the goal itself for Kerry-Ann Brown, you're saying probably the keeper could have done a little bit better. I'd also question the defenders, the fact that there's 4 defenders nearly around Kerry-Ann Brown within a probably a 10-12 yard radius of it, and you're sort of saying, they need to do a little bit better, they need to give a little bit more support. But it's a different sign at times if that's what we're picking out, you know, and we're not picking out Cork leaking silly goals left, right, and centre. They're not gifting things left, right, and centre. Like, granted, it was still a good strike from Kerry-Ann Brown as well, and you know she finished it quite well. But the fact that Cork are able to stay in these sort of games now, they're able to be competitive in these sort of games. It's a massive step on from where we've seen Cork in previous years, and I think it does bode well. And I think realistically for them, they're sort of looking at if they can continue to get, because they're already on the verge, or they already got more points than they got last. They've already got more points than they got last year in less than half the games. So for them, it's about how many more can they get, how many more results can they get, how far can they finish up that table. Like, to be sitting sixth after 9 games, Danny Murphy would be extremely happy. Granted, their goal difference is minus 12. He'd be disappointed over that, but they've already won 3 and drawn 1 out of 9 games, which is a big improvement from Cork City this year.
Yeah, final game of the weekend, of course, DLR Waves and Sligo Rovers, 2 bottom sides in the division, went in level on points, and DLR 2 great strikes. So one a free kick from Jess Gleeson in the first half, and then a strike in the second half. Name escapes me now. Rebecca McMahon, from good distance. Really, the goalkeeper had very little to do with either. Well, you might say the free kick could maybe have been set up a little bit differently, but it was basically a penalty, as they said in the commentary and the highlights. Basically a penalty from 20 yards, with a wall, and just a power. Jess Gleeson just sought to the back of the net. But DLR badly needed it, their first win of the weekend of the season. But for Sligo, the misery just goes on for Tommy Hewitt and his girls.
Yeah, I've been thinking about this for the last couple of days, actually, Breifne, and no disrespect to Steve Feeney, who was there last year, but the job is probably a lot bigger than we thought when we look at what other clubs have done this year to close the gap. The job at Sligo was probably that little bit bigger in terms of the player power. Yes, you've got the likes of Emma Doherty there, but it now turns out when we see how big of a loss the likes of Casey Howe was going to Athlone, and it's a really, really difficult job there. And I think at this stage, with the squad that they've got from a Sligo viewpoint, and I don't want to be disrespectful when I say this, but a lot of people will probably be surprised that they've got 3 draws on the board. And one of them draws obviously coming against Shelbourne on the opening day of the season. You know, a lot of people are probably surprised at that. And I think there is still a lot that Tommy is trying to implement there. Tommy is trying to, like, you look at his first year with Athlone. You know, look at Athlone's first year in the league. Athlone were poor in the first year in the league. It was only the teams around they were competitive against. Like, I definitely think he's going to need another transfer window or 2 before he can start really getting that squad. And the question is, does he have the patience? Does he have the, you know, to stay there and actually build that? Will the club allow him to do that? But the problem is it's difficult for a club like Sligo to compete even with the likes of Galway, because if you've got a player in that sort of region who's very good and you've got a bit of a choice, Galway or Sligo, at the minute you're probably going to pick Galway.
Athlone are in that conversation as well, let's not be honest. And I suppose over the last couple of seasons, I suppose I know Sligo quite well, haven't been involved with the club at their founding, but they lost Casey Howe this year to Athlone, very high profile. They lost Jeremy McGuinness the year before to Galway. So that direction, that train is already going. Now, that being said, there are players coming the other way. Myrne Devaney came in from Athlone. Kelsey Monroe, I'm not sure whether she came from Athlone or from Galway, but she was at both. So those players are coming back the other way as well. But I just think Sligo, there's so much good stuff happening in Sligo and women's football in general. We saw the very first, well, maybe first in my memory anyway, but the first in over a decade, a junior women's league. They got 13 or 12 or 13 clubs, 14 clubs maybe. It was very successful. Season ran off really well. Very few games not played. There's a real buzz around women's football at junior level in the region. That didn't exist before the start of last year, and there's a lot of work gone in from the likes of Dizzy Hyman and stuff to make that happen. Within the league, there's a lot of people involved, but she was kind of the figurehead of it, and she got it up and running, and it's now making waves locally, and there's teams looking forward to it. They've won the Gaynor Cup this year. It's their second time winning it in about 5 years at under 14 level. So there is a pool of players there. The challenge is keeping them around, keeping them maybe away, not necessarily away, but encouraging them to come and play with you rather than go maybe play ladies Gaelic football with Leitrim or Sligo, who tend to be those two teams that are represented there. And both those teams are competitive in their grades in ladies Gaelic football. So it's very tempting when they're kind of competing for championships and leagues and Sligo Rovers are at the bottom of the table. It's very difficult to have that conversation with a player and say, come play with us. There's any amount of girls played with Sligo Rovers underage who are now playing for Mayo, Sligo, Leitrim in Gaelic football. It's very hard to convince them to come back.
Yeah, absolutely. And the other side of things is as well is that Gainer Cup success. You have to then transfer that into the underage teams and keep them at that age. There's no point, as you say, there's no point if they go to Gaelic football early on, you're not getting them back. When that choice comes and things becomes more, and you get the county panels and things become a lot more difficult, you're not going to get them back. And like the thing is, as you say there, with the buzz in Sligo, it's going to take a bit of time for that to sort of feed to Sligo Rovers, but it's also going to take an openness from Sligo Rovers to adapt and to actually use that and to help everything that's good that's going on in women's football and embrace it and bring it all to help to progress Sligo Rovers, because there's no doubt they've got an opportunity these next couple of years to take massive steps, but it's going to take a lot from the club, from the committee members. It's not just going to be the women's first team. It's going to take volunteers. It's going to take an awful lot of people to actually come and say, okay, what do we need to do here? What is our strategic plan for the women's team? We're having success at Gainer Cup level. We've got 13 women's teams in junior football. How can we make that it's a conveyor belt? It's the transferring straight through to Sligo Rovers, and the Sligo Rovers see the benefit. And I think realistically, from a club like that, they're in a position now where they may need to go away and look at what the strategic plan is for the women's game for the next couple of years, because if they can put the right strategic plan in place, there's no doubt that they can do what the likes of Galway done when we've seen Galway winning underage leagues in previous years. And then we're now seeing these players playing. Granted, they're not all playing with Galway, but we're seeing some of them then playing with the likes of Athlone as well and having success at national level.
Yeah, I think the only problem for them in the short term is the next five league games. Shamrock Rovers, Peamount. I think they're away home to Shells. Then they've got Bows away and then Athlone away. So it's not going to get any easier over the next 6 weeks or so in the women's Premier Division for Sligo Rovers. Let's move on from last weekend's games and some of the interesting news that's happened over the weekend. And that is, of course, the addition of Waterford to the league for next year. Well, pending a license, of course. But the fact that they're in, we saw a tweet from Carlo Kilkenny, that they weren't permitted into the process for that license. Your thoughts on, first of all, a new team is great, but your thoughts on maybe the impact that Waterford are going to have? Is there going to be a negative impact on Wexford from a geographic point of view? What's your thoughts?
I'm not sure if it will be, because they've been in the underage leagues for a couple of years as well. There is a sort of a little bit of a different catchment area there. But the one probably negative that they may have is they may have that Carlo Kilkenny catchment that Carlo Kilkenny were probably hoping to get in a couple of years' time. They may start to feed into the likes of that. They'll feed into the likes of obviously Tipperary and stuff like that as well. And I think it's great. I think it's good for the league. You know my opinion on 11-team league. I absolutely despise it. Like, especially when you look at the fact of the international, the next break that's coming up, the team who don't play before it, it's an even longer break, and it's just frustrating. And I really don't like the 11-team league. It's good to see new teams coming in. We're not privy to a lot of what's gone on in the background. We don't know how many teams applied, how many teams, were said no to. But the fact that there was a process that happened, to me, that's the important thing, is there was a process that happened. Like, even when Shamrock Rovers come in, there was no formal announcement of a process. Everybody knew Shamrock Rovers were coming in, but there was no formal announcement or from the FAI to say, hey, we're looking for expression. So I don't know whether the FAI review all requests every year or what way to review them. But for me, club licensing for the National League, for the League of Ireland, is really important, and that's why I'm glad to see that this is the first year of it. So once Waterford meet that criteria, I'd expect they will be in next year. It'd be interesting to see where they're going to play their games. Do they play them in the Waterford IT or it's whatever it's called, Technical University, Southeast Technical University, Waterford now I think it's called at this stage, or do they play them in the RSC? That'll be interesting to see what they do there. I'm hoping that I would imagine that they're probably going to have to be in the RSC because of the fact of licensing for seats. But in terms of squads, I think it's probably one that we're gonna have to play a wait and see game. Who did attract for that job? That's the question that I would have. I wouldn't be surprised to see John McLean applying for that. I wouldn't be surprised if Waterford started to try and sound out Brian O'Sullivan, who was the assistant manager at Peamount United as well last year, has also managed Wexford in the men's league of Ireland First Division.
Don't
to see
forget
what he have.
Jess Lawton is their current under-19 women's manager with Premier Division experience.
Was that the reason why she went there? You know, did she know that was going to happen and that was going to be her next step? Like, because there's no doubt what she's done at Cork. She's right there banging the mix for that opportunity. If she feels she's ready for it, that's up to Jess to decide. But she'd probably be the number one candidate, I'd say, at this stage for them. And if they had another female coach in the league, you know, it's great for the league. But I think from a Waterford, I think they'll take their time, they'll do the due diligence, and I don't know what to expect from them. That's the honest answer. I really don't know what to expect, and there's no doubt they'll be able.
The one thing I like about the entire process is that it's happening now in June for February or March start next year. And I think that's something, and I think that's the sort of stuff that the League of Ireland, that all the behind closed doors changes and rumors that are coming out of the FAI over the last decade, for 5 or 6, 10 years. I think what Mark Scanlon has brought to the League of Ireland is that sort of professionalism. Rather than having that process in January next year, it's now happening now, and the licenses will be given out probably in the next 2 or 3 months. I think it's usually September when they're announced now. That's huge improvement. Personally, I'd love to see it 12 months out. You see in America now, they're bigger budgets, bigger operations. You see a 2-year kind of addition. They're confirmed as entry license, and then they're starting in 2006 or 26 or 27, and they have the opportunity to put in place the staffing, the sponsorships, the finances, the resources that are required to operate a team at what is a very elite level. And I think that's really positive from the FAI. So yeah, would I like to see more teams in? Absolutely. Would I like to see a second tier? Absolutely. I think rather than going for a team of a 12-team division, I'd have preferred to see us going for 2 8s and actually having a whole load more teams who are knocking on the door. The likes of Cove, Dundalk, Finn Harps, they should all be looking to get in as well. Carlo Kilkenny have expressed an interest. Kerry even are coming up. They've got teams at 17s and 19s.
Pats.
You could definitely, Pats. You could definitely get 16 teams out of the country. And I think there are teams, with all due respect, we've talked about Sligo, we've talked about DLR in previous seasons, and I suppose Cork and Treaty in the last 4 or 5 years as well, that would have benefited from being the stronger teams in a second tier than being the whipping girls in the top tier at times. And I think that would also, if you're a Finn Harps or a Cove, do you want to subscribe to a league where you're going to face Shells on the first day and Galway the week 2 and Athlone in week 3? No. But if they told you, okay, it's going to be Cork, Treaty, Sligo, DLR, Dundalk, Drogheda, all of a sudden it's like going, oh yeah, actually we can probably be competitive in half those games year 1. And all of a sudden
just for those listening, we don't make decisions, so we don't pick. If they were to have a second division, we wouldn't pick who. What Breifne's saying here? It's not to disrespect the clubs. It's. I get what you're saying. It's
going on tradition, yeah.
But for me, I think this is the last of it. I don't think we'll see any more clubs added to the Premier Division. I think they won't add any more clubs. What they'll have to do next, I think 12 is the max. Next time we see clubs, I think that is going to be that first division.
But I think what they'll have to do now is actually wait for a load of those teams to mature, maybe for 2027, 2027, and bring in 10 of them, bring in maybe 8 of them at the one time and drop 2 teams down, and you end up like you have with the men with 2 10-team leagues. And I think that is probably where we need to be. I think the quality of players and the player pool is there for a 10-team division. I think you go into 12 next year, we're going to see certain teams struggle again because like Wexford and Waterford are now pulling out of the same gene pool effectively. Waterford and Cork will already kind of pull from that pool as well for girls living maybe in East Cork or West Waterford. We're pulling out of the same pool of players for all these teams, and I think we need to start looking at the areas that aren't well covered, likes of Dundalk in North Louth or Finn Harps need a team. Kerry probably needs a team from a geographic point of view. Carlo Kilkenny, you could argue, needs a team. There's a lot of girls based in Carlo. playing with Wexford at the moment, but they're all going to damage each other in terms of squad depth. The youngsters are coming through though, and that's the most positive thing.
Just on that for seconds. That's probably the biggest thing for me is that now in women's football, we have the best talented youngsters that we're probably going to ever have coming through. So it's the most important thing is that we don't waste a generation where they go off and they get disgruntled because they're not getting into a senior national league team within a quick succession, and then all of a sudden they're not playing soccer or they're off playing other sports. I think that's where the fine balancing act over the next couple of years is going to be massive for the FAI.
Absolutely. Let's take a quick look at the league table as it stands going into this weekend's fixtures. Shell's top of the table, 21 points, 2 points ahead of both Galway and Athlone, who do have that game in hand. A little bit of a gap then to Peamount, who have 14 points. Wexford and Cork, again, Wexford with that game in hand on Cork and Shells. They're on 10 points, and then the rest of the sides, Shamrock Rovers and DLR Waves getting their first wins of the season last weekend. Treaty and Bows in the mix with them, and then at the bottom of the table.
Do you know what's interesting? The bye weeks in the second half of the season don't go in the same order.
Well, that's probably fair, like, do you know what I mean?
Because if they had it, then Shells would have not played on the last week of the season. I'll give you an interesting one. Do you know what the last game of the season is this year?
I could check very quick.
No, without checking.
Shamrock Rovers?
Shamrock, yeah, because you checked it. Shamrock Rovers.
Oh, I didn't check it. It just come up now, but I didn't check it. If I was picking a game to have on the last day of the season, start of the year, I'd have picked that game.
But that's where my biggest frustration with the 11-team league is that if we get to that stage, like if you look at that 11-team league, no disrespect to them, but Cork are going to be the team who are off on the last day of the season. Could you imagine if that was a Galway, Athlone, or Shelbourne who were off on the last day of the season and we were going down to a title race? And say Shells have played their last game and Shells could potentially win the league, and Shells don't know. Shells won't get it after playing a game. They'll have to wait on the other results. I would not like that if you're to win a league that way.
No, but I think the fixtures, as much as the fixtures are generated by a computer these days, I think the fixtures are also manipulated to set up those kind of big games and at big occasions. We didn't really mention the Parc y Cuivre situation. Ireland, France, it's going to be in Parc y Cuivre. I think that's massive for the game in Cork, but also for the likes of Denise O'Sullivan and Megan Connolly, who get to play a home international of consequence in a massive stadium in Cork. It's a bit of a homecoming, and I think particularly for Denise, who's done so much internationally in the game.
Yeah, I have a gripe on this.
Okay, I'm not surprised.
So in the last week, listen, I'm looking forward to going to Cork. It's nothing to do with actually playing. Over the last week or so, when the game was announced, everything I've seen on social media was make Denise captain for the night. Make Denise captain for the night. To me, that is so disrespectful to Megan Connolly. Yes, what Denise has done on playing North Carolina and stuff like that. Yes, granted. But Megan Connolly's also been to a European Championship semi-final with an under-19s team. Like, I don't think you can turn around and say make one player captain because they're from Cork if there's multiple players from Cork captain. Listen, it's great to see that the Cork girls will get that sort of occasion, that will get that sort of thing. Megan Connolly will get to do something that her brother's got to do for many years, is run out into the pitch in Parc y Cuivre, and he's been playing Gaelic football for Cork. She'll get to do it playing for Ireland. But I don't like that of calling for a player to be made captain because she's from the area when they play there.
Okay, that's fair enough. But nobody's suggesting that should happen other than a few maybe online people.
And journalists.
Okay. Well, in terms of... Well, let's talk about that for a minute, because I don't see that as such a big deal. Let's be honest. If Ireland had played in Cork in the men's back in the day and you had picked Roy Keane, I don't think Colin Healy or Liam Miller or Dennis Irwin would necessarily have had a problem with it. And Irwin had a phenomenal career. So I don't think they would have had a massive problem with Keane being handed the armband for the game in Cork. Because let's be honest about it. I bring up the league table here, but ultimately the game is irrelevant because we are so far out of that competition. It's unbelievable. Like, you look at
we're actually already guaranteed to finish bottom.
Yeah, we can't even catch England. Even if we beat everybody now at this stage, we're 7 points behind. We can't catch them. So that game is, let's be honest, completely and utterly meaningless.
Yeah, but then for me, what that then comes down to is trying to add tokenism to a game where, granted, we're going to have to go into that game against England, against France, where we're probably more than likely, we're going to have to go into that game against France where we need to keep the scoreline down, where we need to, we're not playing for qualification, but we're going to go into that game more than likely chasing a goal difference because of the fact of Poland. What happens with the last, because there's no doubt about it. Poland have easier last two games. I think they've got Austria as one of them, and I can't remember who Iceland. I think it's Iceland. Whereas we've got England and France in the last two games. Whereas you look at our group at the minute, when we play England in Carrow Road, England need a result. Yeah. England need a result because England are coming. France are top of the table. Whereas France know if France beats Sweden, France are through. France are qualified. Whereas if France were to get a draw against Sweden and England were to win, France are coming to Cork, chasing a win and knowing that a potential goal difference is potentially on the line between them getting that qualification and not getting that qualification. So to me, it's important that we actually recognise this game for the importance of it and not just try to turn it into it's a game in Cork. Let's celebrate the Cork people. Yes, great, celebrate the Cork people. If you want to do presentations or something to them before the game because it's the first time in Cork, absolutely do that sort of stuff. But for me,
I think the presentation is overkill. But the captaincy for the night wouldn't necessarily be overkill.
But is making one a captain over the other not a bit disrespectful to the other?
I don't think
both have over 50 caps, or one is over 100 caps and one is over 50 caps.
I get what you're saying, but I think there's a level within the game as well. Yeah, you might be on the same more or less squad and you might be in the same level, but I think like you look at the seasons they've just had, for example, Denise Sullivan lifted a trophy as captain of North Carolina Courage in the last 12 months, and Megan Connolly was relegated with Brighton. So, like, it's Bristol. Sorry. So I think there's a clear level now. I'm not dissing Megan Connolly. I think she's a phenomenal athlete, phenomenal contributor to the women's.
But does that then mean if we go and play? But does this then mean if we go play a friendly in Galway because the Dublin venues aren't available, Heather Payne or Niamh Fight, you have to be made captain? You know, that's sort of nearly setting a precedent as well. Like if it's a friendly, it's a completely different situation, but it's still a competitive game at the end of the day.
Listen, I wouldn't do it myself personally, but I don't have a problem with it being done, if that makes sense. But we'll agree to disagree on that, I think. Let's talk about the actual venue, because it's obviously a GAA stronghold in Cork. It's been unavailable, I suppose, to soccer teams for a long, long time. Liam Miller's testimonial or memorial fixture kind of fixed that problem. It's a welcome boost, I suppose, to the game in Cork, but also to the GAA in Cork, who need funds to actually pay for the stadium. The tickets are pretty pricey though, €25. Should probably.
I think there were 25. I think there were 25 as well for the Sweden game. There were 20 or 25 for Sweden game. I've no problem with that. The cost of it. The other side of things that people need to be aware of as well is because this is a Gaelic football ground which has terracing, they cannot use the terraces because of the UEFA rules. So it's only going to be the two main stands that are going to be used. I think it's a capacity of 22,000 thereabouts. So I'd expect it to get there. I'd expect it to get close. I'd expect it to sort of near enough hit that. And listen, it's great to see the opportunity to play a game in somewhere like Páirc Uí Chaoimh, and especially when you look at, I'd assume that Pro-S would have been the Aviva first, Tala second, and then they're probably looking at the RDS tour as their potential third choice. But with the RDS being redeveloped, Tala not being available with Rovers, and the Aviva out with concerts, like it was a case of where do you go? I wouldn't have likened them to just put this sort of game in somewhere like a Richmond Park, going back to the old days. I think when the GAA passed that regulation earlier in the year to say, you know, other games could happen in grounds a lot more freely. We've seen Leinster play the Champions Cup semi-final in Croke Park. Like we've seen, I think it was Munster played Crusaders in Thomond Park in Páirc Uí Chaoimh last year. Like I think it's great. I think it's a good opportunity. It's a great financial one for the people of the county board in Cork.
Win-win-win for everybody. Let's be honest.
Mm-hmm.
The supporters get better facilities. The teams get better stadiums. The GA get significantly more income than they might from a club game that's happening there the same day. So,
but the biggest thing here is Ireland fans get their wish. Ireland fans for many years, and this is where they need to back it up. I've been asking to have the team play some games around the country. So this is where they need to come out and they need to sort of say, okay, people of the regions of Munster, they've asked for a long time for games to be played in that sort of region. Now it's the chance to come out and back it up and say, you come here, we can sell this game out, we can come and we can make it an atmosphere. Because realistically then what that does is that then gives the FAI a sort of an opportunity going down the line. Because don't get me wrong, I can't see Ireland playing many games in Tallaght again. I can't see that. I can't see that happening. I think majority of qualifiers will potentially happen in the Aviva Stadium. But what's saying having an option of going to Porky for a game, even if it's a friendly, or going somewhere like that for a game every once in a while, or like unfortunately I don't think Salt Hill is up to it due to the fact that the amount of terracing that they have in Galway. But like what's to say going to somewhere like that can't be done on a more regular basis?
Yeah, you never know. Park Sean McDermott and Carrick and Shannon's getting redeveloped as well at the moment. It could be the next spot.
But you don't even hear a dud given out about going to Cork.
Yeah, 100%. In terms of fixtures next weekend, they're running across the screen there all morning. We've talked about a few of them already. Any of them stand out to you as must go to games this weekend?
Shelbourne and Galway. Shell's running high and 5 wins in a row. I think that's the one for me, and it's going to set the tone for the afternoon with the early kickoff. It's going to be a cracking game. I just hope the weather stays dry, and because the thing is, we've got results in Tolka Park in the last number of years. They put in some big performances and walked away with some big wins and some big draws. Shell's not going to have it their own way, and as you say, with Shell's not necessarily being free-flowing scoring, what's going to happen in that game, nobody knows. Galway need to get a response. I think that's probably one of them. I would expect Wexford to beat DLR. I'd expect Shamrock Rovers to beat Sligo Rovers. I think Athlone will beat Treaty, but they won't have it all their own way. Athlone going for their 6th win in a row, which is another big one. And I'd expect, based off results of last couple of weeks, I know Peamount aren't at 100%, but I'd still expect Peamount to beat Bows and probably beat them comfortable enough.
Yeah, it's going to be an interesting weekend. Let's run through the fixtures one by one. You've touched on the Shells Galway game. Can Galway get back top of the league with a win here?
Yes, they can. Will they? That's the big question. It was to pull out the mystery ball right here, I'd probably say it's going to be a draw.
Okay, you grammar Nazi. Bows Peamount. A lot of players know these two teams very well. They've played across the two of them over the last couple of seasons. P's just fallen off the pace a little bit. 7 points off leaders Shells. They really need a win. Bows will be smart enough after last week. Can Bows compete against Peamount at the weekend?
They need to have some drastic changes in the final third if they're to compete. I thought the final third is where they've really been lacking. IT Peamount winning this comfortable enough. Even if the likes of Sidefall is still out, I still see Peamount win this comfortable enough.
Bows only hit the net 4 times this season. Now they're really missing the kind of the goal getters that they lost. The likes of Erica Burke and Sarah Rowe that left.
See, I wouldn't necessarily say Burke, but it's the one thing that I've been crying out to you for since I started doing the show is that a lot of clubs in this league lack that out-and-out striker. That's where a lot of clubs are struggling at the minute. They lack that out-and-out striker that's going to go and bag you a bunch of goals. Like realistically, if I'm Bows, you're making a play for in the transfer market. Can I get a likes of an Emily Corbett? Can I get someone who even banging goals in the underage leagues to come and try and give them an opportunity? Because I think realistically, 4 goals in what they've played so far, it's not a great return. It's not a great return at all.
They're looking for the next Keola Bergen basically coming through from the 17th. Yeah. In terms of Sligo Rovers, Shamrock Rovers, Clash of the Rovers doesn't quite have the same ring to it. Both on the bottom half of the table, both on very different trajectories in the last couple of weeks. Shamrock Rovers, that is, putting together some nice results in the Avenir Sports Cup. They also had a big win against Bows last weekend. A win could, in theory, take them into the top half of the table this week, and that'll be a bit of a respite for under pressure Collie O'Neill, I'd imagine, who has to be under pressure at the start of the 6 months.
He doesn't come across it. He comes across cool, calm, and collected. That was the one thing that I sort of and I should have said this earlier when I interviewed him at the weekend, he just come across so relaxed. And I was like, for a man who's just won his first league game of the season, I couldn't believe how calm he was. And maybe the conversations are happening in the background where Rovers know a lot of things haven't gone the way they want them, and the club are sort of, because you have to remember,
performances have been good.
But the other side of it is Stephen Bradley, when he came in and took over Rovers men. I remember speaking to people being like, Bradley never win a trophy at Shamrock Rovers. He'd started so poor. Fans were nearly calling for his head at certain stages.
Well, they were definitely calling for the head. Banners.
You know what I mean? Whereas look what he's done now. Granted, this season hasn't gone their way, but there's a potential that Collie O'Neill can turn this around. And I think they're going to give him the time, because if they were going to sack him, he'd be long gone after some of them defeats. He'd have been out the door already. I think they're going to be patient with him.
Absolutely.
In terms of the game,
I think they need to be patient with him, to be honest, because I think he's potentially building some of those underage players coming through. They're a little bit young, but when they kind of mature a little bit, they will be a force to be reckoned with in the game in this country, I think.
The problem is, before I even talk about this game itself, the problem is he hasn't had younger underage players like the likes of Hannah Healy, Rebecca Devro, them sort of players who are ready to just step in and sort of win you games or put you in massive performances. Even at Abby Larkin, when she initially broke onto the stage, he hasn't had the players that are that far along developed to where he's having to nurture them. He's having to sort of bring them in gradually. Like, you look, young Katie O'Reilly, as you mentioned earlier, had a very good game the weekend and doesn't look out of place when she's playing for that Shamrock Rovers team. And as we mentioned earlier, Ella Kelly, another one, doesn't look out of place. The only thing I will say is I think he looks to be cautious about who he brings in from the underage players and how he's doing it. So I'm sure Colley's probably had a lot of conversations with what he wants to do. In terms of this game itself, I think a lot of the Sligo Rovers players will be quite, not looking forward to the game, but they'll be quite reflective of the game they had last year where Shamrock Rovers got massively out of jail against them in the showgrounds, and they'll be sort of looking back on that, not wanting that to happen again. Realistically, it's going to take a 10 out of 10 defensive performance from Sligo Rovers to get anything out of this game. I would fancy Shamrock Rovers to back it up and come away with a win, but I don't think it'll be as dominant as the win they had against Bows.
Yeah, next game coming up is that one I just mentioned, the DLR and travel to Wexford. So that's Ferrycarrig Park, 6 o'clock on Saturday evening. It's been a rough season for, I suppose, both teams really this year in terms of the performances. Wexford have started to kind of pull out of it a little bit, but your thoughts? That was a great win in Galway. Like, let's be honest about it at the weekend. But can they just mount the misery on DLR this weekend, or will DLR kind of pull their season back after their win in Galway or in Sligo?
Okay. I think the winning at DLR in the ball. To be honest with you, I think we're going to look back and we're going to say even the win that Wexford had against Treaty was a very good win, as well as the win against Galway. Like, it's the fact that they've backed it up with a second win. They're going to go into this game against DLR Waves full of confidence. I would expect them to get the 3 points. I would expect them to win the game. I don't think DLR will make it easy for them. I think DLR will be compact and they'll sort of make it hard for them. But I just think Wexford just have that little bit more of a firepower to get them over the line. And if they get 3 wins on the bounce, for them, then we're looking at it. How can they push on? How can they sort of push into that second half of the season? Because, like, you look at their next game after that, they play Cork City before playing Shells in the last game before the break. So if they were to beat DLR and then beat Cork City, that's 4 wins on the bounce in the league, and probably haven't done that in about 2 years from our extra viewpoint.
Yeah, interesting to see how that goes. Final game of the weekend then is Athlone Town versus Treaty. Hard to see anything but a Athlone Town win here, but Treaty are getting harder and harder to break down, aren't they?
I think Treaty will be absolutely fuming over their Shelbourne result for the goal they conceded, and they'll want to come and make amends to that. I think they'll push Athlone all the way. The only problem about Treaty, not the only problem, the only thing for Treaty here is if Treaty have a moment of lapse, Athlone have the firepower that maybe Shells don't have to cut them apart and score 3, 4, 5 goals in a quick succession. So from a Treaty point of view, they need to make sure they're compact. They're, when they go forward, that they have their game plan in order. And I think Dominic Foley will. I think that they probably will come out the wrong side of either a 2-1 or a 3-1 defeat in this game, but they'll definitely put it up to Athlone for sure.
Yeah, interesting times ahead. Where are you heading yourself this weekend?
Going to Shels Galway for me. Can't wait. It's the first time I've actually seen Galway live this year. I think it's going to be a fascinating game of football. I think it's going to be one that, as I said, I can't call. I think it could end a draw. I just, with the fact that Shels not scoring enough goals, if Galway score early, what's going to happen? That's the question that I'm intrigued about. Shels having to chase a game. How are they going to go about that?
Yeah, it's going to be interesting. I'm thinking of heading down to Sligo to the Clash of the Rovers down there as well, just to see both sides and see how they get on. But time will tell. I haven't checked the fixture list elsewhere to see what my commitments are, but that's the plan at the moment in time. Aaron, anything else before we wrap up?
No, I think we're pretty good for we're pretty good for this week.
Well, listen, that is it for the week then. In that case, if you've nothing else to say, Aaron, we will move on. It's been, of course, loads happening. The Avenir All-Island Cup will be back. Quarterfinals are in 10 days' time. Some big clashes there. We'll be chatting about that next week. And also, of course, the build-up to the Irish women's national team squad being picked at the start of July for those games against France and England. England, of course, in Norwich. Looking forward to that as well. But the game in Páirc Uí Chaoimh, if you're based in the south of the country, do get yourself to Páirc Uí Chaoimh.
The only thing I will say about that game in Páirc Uí Chaoimh, it's a 6 o'clock kickoff. It's not a 7:30 kickoff, just for people to be aware. The
kids are out of school at 3 or 4, so bring the young ones in your life.
All kids are off. It's the summertime. All kids are off.
Of course. Easy knowing I don't have kids when that's not in my part. Anyway, Aaron, listen, great chatting to you. We'll chat to you again next week. To everyone else, join us again next week. Don't forget to subscribe on YouTube or Spotify or wherever you're listening or watching this podcast. We'll be back with you again next week. Talk to you then.